Hello, and welcome to FinTech Insider Insights. I'm Kate Moody, Customer Strategy Director here at 11FS. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest themes shaping financial services right now, AI-powered customer experiences. Over the past few weeks, the 11FS Pulse team has been researching and benchmarking some of the most interesting AI products and experiences emerging from the US market. Alongside that work, we've also spoken to a couple of the companies building them to better understand the thinking behind their approach. Throughout today's episode, we'll hear directly from those conversations before unpacking what they tell us about the future of AI in financial services. Joining me today are two colleagues from the 11FS Pulse team who've been leading that research. First up, we have Joe Colchester, Head of Product. Joe, welcome back to FinTech Insider. Tell our listeners a little bit more about your role at 11FS Pulse. And also, I believe you've been chatting about this topic, not just recently with Inside Pulse, but also at Money 2020, right? So lots of things to cover with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. I lead the product at 11FS Pulse, so manage the product team and the content team. And yes, I was recently speaking about AI and how best to design AI at Money 2020. And a lot of the kind of themes that we'll be talking about today did come up. It was obviously a huge topic throughout the whole of the convention, but it's very exciting just talking about it today as well.
Brilliant. Well, looking forward to picking your brains as we go through. And alongside Joe, we have Oliwia, Wasik, Product Manager and Benchmark Lead, also at 11FS Pulse. Oliwia, welcome back to the show. Again, maybe remind our listeners a bit more about what it is precisely you do at 11FS Pulse and maybe some things you've been seeing across the products you've been looking at.
Sure. Thank you, Kate. So I'm a Product Manager and Benchmarking Lead at Pulse. So what I do is I look under the hood of some of these AI products and experiences to see what's genuinely good design and what is maybe just AI dressed up for a little demo. And the thing that struck me was that we're adding AI means very different things at different companies. And actually the strongest experiences don't just add AI, but actually start with the question of, okay, how do we solve a problem for our customers? And maybe other thing is that the model that people are using is not really the differentiator, but rather the guardrails and the controls in place.
Interesting. Well, definitely excited to explore that a bit more as we go through the conversation. So we've got a brilliant team assembled. Let's dive in. Financial services finds itself in the centre of a hype to value cycle where brands are mobilising to move beyond simply talking about the potential of AI and onto embedding it into their products and services. But as we know from the shift to digital, a transformation of that scale doesn't happen overnight. And that's exactly why AI isn't as prominent across the customer experience as your LinkedIn feed would have you believe. However, there are brands making considerable strides, particularly in the US, and they're going to be the focus of today's show. Joe and Oliwia have crafted a list of their favourite experiences that embrace AI from across the pond, which we're going to go through today. So let's start with Robinhood. We asked them what the core problem they were looking to solve for their customers was. Jordan Sinclair, Robinhood's UK president, answered our questions.
For our UK customers, it was making sure that we met their UK needs. I think it's important when you expand. Our product started in the US and we've grown to over 27 million customers there, but that doesn't mean your product you can lift and drop and just hope they like it. I think spending time with customers before we launched, understanding their pain points. I think in the UK, we heard loud and clear, customers were finding it incredibly difficult to just get easy access to the markets, not pay a ridiculous fee on some of the incumbent providers, but also get access to the market when the news is happening, 24/5. In the UK, the 2:30 is when the market's open in the US and 9 o'clock that closes. You're in the middle of your workday. A lot has happened on both sides of those times and the market moves. And for a long time, retail just didn't have access to those moves. And I think that's important. If you give customers access to be able to trade when the market's open, which these days is 24/5, and in time, I believe it will be 24/7, you end up giving retail access to what institutionals had for a long time. I think our AI tools like Cortex and giving more and more products available to customers so they can build a portfolio, that's the way you localize and make sure that your UK customers have their needs met, but also you bring the innovation that we've developed in the US that we know customers love and that a lot of customers yet keep asking us for.
Yeah, super interesting to hear directly from Robinhood. I mean, Joe, you've examined a number of companies in this space. What stands out to you about how they're approaching solving customer problems?
Well, I think we heard it just then, and Oliwia said it earlier as well. I think starting with the customer problem first, not just thinking how do we add AI, because I'm hearing a lot of hype about it, and there's lots of great technology out there. But really starting at the where's the problem, and how can we use these technologies to solve them? That's where the best products are observed, I think. I think we've seen examples across lots of different industries within finance as well, and insurance is another one. For example, Lemonade, their chat interface is very, very tailored just to making how can we make claims faster and less painful. It's not just a generic chat bot that is hoping to save money on customer support. It's very tailored and has a clear purpose that's rooted in customer value.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Oliwia, what's your take? What's surprising you about how companies are deciding where AI actually is adding value and how to use it?
Yeah, I think what's surprising is that first, more AI doesn't always mean that the experience is going to be somehow better. And also that more autonomous AI doesn't mean kind of better or higher value. And sometimes the most value is added actually when AI stays in the background and actually does simplify a task or helps user makes a better decision. So we can think of it on a spectrum, on like the use of AI on a spectrum from informing. So that would be something like a chatbot answering your queries, to advising, which is something that Public had or still has alpha AI, to actually, enacting the action. And the more you move forward to the end of enacting an action, the more guardrails you need to actually prove that the human is still in control, which is maybe counterintuitive, but that surprised me.
Yeah, no, I think we're definitely going to spend some time today talking about guardrails for sure. And I think, Joe, I thought it was a really interesting point you're making about, needing to start from the customer problem and not kind of just start from the technology and how to apply the technology. I mean, we've kind of been here before in the world of, the move to digital, more basically, right? Like when people first started to kind of launch banking apps, we saw lots of people just sort of saying, how do we get everything into the app? Like, it's got to go into the app. It's got to be available in the app. Do you think this is just the same problem, but with AI, or is AI increasing this problem or kind of making this technology versus customer problem gap bigger than usual?
I think the gap is larger than usual. And I think the stakes are higher than usual, but it is a similar problem to what we've dealt with before. I'm not sure what you think about that, Oliwia, but I think I think the stakes is higher, but the expectations are perhaps higher. But it's kind of get the customer problem done before implementing the technology first, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's so many incentives, right? And outside pressures to implement AI across all sorts of businesses. We're not kind of financial services is not the only industry that's experiencing it. I think we are a particular industry, and that rightfully so. We need to be very closely regulated. And so that is giving a lot of constraint into what AI can do. But then also you end up in a weird situation where, okay, there are these constraints, so the AI cannot do that much, but let's stick it on anyway. And so there's, a frustrating situation which you're trying to ask this financial co-pilot that's meant to change your life, how much did I spend on groceries last month? And it doesn't understand your prompt. So, that I think I see as a problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, AI is still relatively new on the scene, obviously, but not completely new, but compared to other technologies, it's new. But do you think we've seen any learning still within the time that AI has been a factor for these teams? Have we seen companies applying it differently now versus they were, say, 6-12 months ago?
I think that we're starting to see better interpretations of queries and questions. It's not so, you might used to find out, did you mean this? And it's, no, I did not mean this. And it would send you down the wrong kind of path. And you have a kind of strange triage that had nothing to do with the original query. It's better at doing that. As we know, language models are very good at interpreting what you're saying, even if there's spelling mistakes, misuse of jargon, local dialect. It's very good at doing that. So I think that's been one of the biggest leaps that we've seen over the past year, is getting better at understanding what the user means, and that's a very positive user experience.
Yeah, Oliwia, what do you reckon?
Yes, I also like the approach of AI being in the background. So I'm not a huge fan, these experiences could be good, but the very conversational bot with its own personality, I think that can feel a little gimmicky. But there are some experiences like Chime AI that just works in the background and kind of works through nudges, behavioral nudges, prompts, that kind of surfaces relevant actions or advice based on kind of all the information and proprietary data that it gathers. And I think I see a lot of potential in that more than in the kind of conversational chatbot.
It's interesting actually how even well over a year on from when these products have been introduced, still the biggest request and concern is, can I off-ramp off of this chatbot? It's still the most important thing to users because they might just not be getting the results they needed. They might just not have any inclination to want to speak to a chatbot. They might much rather speak to a human. So it's winning some people over, but there's still a big void between, I think, what the product teams are pushing and what users actually want, particularly in the case of banks.
Okay. No, I think that's super interesting and probably a good moment for us to jump over to our next clip. And this is from Yannick Malling, the CEO of Public. And we asked them, what tasks are they intentionally not letting AI do and why?
So the way we've designed AI on Public, specifically our agents, is so that if you're building a trading strategy, for example, they will stick to what you agreed and not hallucinate and try to improvise in a way that meaningfully changes your entire trading strategy. Basically, having this split between having inference in the Copilot companion that you use to build your trading strategy, but then combined with deterministic execution means that it becomes something that's reliable and transparent and that you can actually allocate real capital to.
Oliwia, what do you make of Public's approach?
I'm glad to hear it, and I agree. I think those trust mechanisms need to be transparent, and these guardrails, kind of human in the loop. The fact that the decisions that the AI is taking is very clearly limited. It has a kind of a kill switch or a pause switch. It's entirely transparent to the user is super important, because a constraint buried in the terms and services might protect the company legally, but doesn't build the trust that is required. So yeah, very, very glad to hear it. And I feel like most of the strongest AI experiences that we have seen are still about support rather than replacement, so that human eyes still have the kind of final say in what the AI does.
Joe, I can see you nodding.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we've all experienced talking to language models where they hallucinate, they give the wrong answers, they pivot and change their minds about something, they get the maths wrong. So when you confine that to the financial services space, the stakes are so high, you really need to nail that. And very glad to see that these chatbots do keep it restricted to what they can say. They let you know what they can and can't say, because that can be confusing if they don't. And they tend to not get things wrong because the guardrails are there, because it only takes one very bad example to lose all trust in these bots, as it's pretty new technology, and maybe something that could go viral. So a lot of brand damage could happen there as well. So the guardrails are important for the user, but also protecting the brand, I think.
Yeah. And obviously we've touched on Robinhood, we've touched on Public. I mean, Joe, which other companies are you kind of keeping an eye on? Which ones do you think are really approaching this in the right way?
In terms of kind of moving more into everyday banking, we're seeing a lot of good stuff now, even in the US as well. So Chime was mentioned earlier. We just gave a Pulse Pick of the Week to Albert. Albert's called Genius AI. They're very good at doing kind of detailed spending analysis, can respond to queries about how the user should be spending their money and what things they can actually plan financial events like holidays and weddings and kind of thing. But there's also an agentic layer, which we're starting to see. It's quite light touch, but it also allows the user full control over that side of things.
Yeah, I hadn't even really thought about agentic AI organizing a wedding. That's like both amazing and terrifying at the same time. Oliwia, who have you got your eye on? Who are you watching?
Intuit and their kind of tax filing AI help, which again, it helps, but the final say always, there's a human in the loop that has a kind of final say. It doesn't just file your taxes by itself. And it's also interesting kind of the architecture behind it. So from what I've seen, what's publicly available is that they build a lot of kind of architecture behind the model. So they monitor risk and fraud and monitor the incidence of hallucinations. And they also have a kind of internal database of the AI interactions so that you get the same kind of experience and the same base across their different tools. So that's, it's not flashy, but I feel like that's a really good example and a good direction to go in.
Yeah, I mean, from a customer perspective, I still find this really interesting in that I completely agree. It's obviously, it's really important to strike that balance between, AI doing some of the heavy lifting, doing some of the kind of the real analysis, and then the kind of the end customer, the end user, being able to kind of make that final decision. But I mean, certainly what we've seen in lots of other spaces, not just in financial services but elsewhere, right, is that when you give someone a summary, do they actually read and analyze all the things that are in that summary? Are they kind of going to look behind the kind of the highest level of information and actually check that all those assumptions are correct, or are they just going to say, like, you've set out these 5 things, I'm going to go say yes? And if something then goes wrong or they have a poor outcome, if they've taken the end action, again, like where that responsibility lies. Again, I suppose the example which comes to me is probably not entirely relevant, right? But the example which comes to mind is like, big long terms and conditions documents, right? Like, people are signing up to legal documents, but they're not actually, in most instances, reading the full list, right? Joe, what do you think? Like, do you think that we've got the right balance here? Like, are we actually setting customers up to make decisions where they are fully responsible for the outcomes, or is there kind of a bit of a grey space here?
I think largely people are treading quite carefully, which is a good thing. We did an open mic recently for Pulse Open Mic Night, and the consensus was we're not ready for agentic AI. So there has been very few big steps, at least on the customer side, where we're seeing that, and people aren't fully ready for it and do require that sign-off. And that sign-off we have been seeing. There are things on the horizon. We heard from Robinhood, and they've just introduced an agentic layer where you can get whatever AI you happen to be using, whatever chatbot, to speak to actually set up an account. An agentic account, give it instructions. You still have to sign off on the trades, but it does encourage a lot more trading and potentially a lot more irresponsible trading, because it's so hard to get programmatic trading right, and who's to say that new amateurs are going to be any good at it. So I guess that kind of thing can give way to ill-advised behavior, but the responsibility is still given back to the user.
Yeah, well, I mean, on that note, we did actually speak to Robinhood. Last week they announced, as you say, like some global accelerations, including agentic trading. And we asked them precisely, given the risks around customers delegating investment decisions to AI agents, what were the biggest concerns they had to work through before launching this, and which product guardrails were non-negotiable. So let's hear from them now.
I think first and foremost, it's important to give customers the types of tools that institutional customers had for a long time. Algorithmic trading or using AI models to support trading strategies has been around for a long time, but not for retail. But there's a combination of human touch, human oversight, along with the agent. And that's the way we think about this in terms of benefits, but also protection and making it safe. So we allow customers to connect to an MCP of their model of choice, but we make sure that the account that the agent has access to is segregated. The customer can determine what the agent can and can't do, the amount that's in there, whether it can trade or just read only. Can turn it off at any point in time. I think those are the types of controls that are important as customers kind of learn to use these types of tools. And I think that is that human oversight element where you can get notifications, you can request to approve, all those types of things where you're not just giving it off hands-free and then seeing the balance at the end of the day. And there might be a customer who chooses to go that route. But I think what's important is those controls and then customer support at the same time, where customers perhaps got started on the journey, but maybe not comfortable where they are, wants to learn more, offering 24/7 phone, chat, email support. I think that's an important component as well, where we may be in an agentic world, but there are still customers who need support, and thinking about that customer who's kind of a prolific Claude and MCP user and knows exactly what to do and has built some cool models, to the customer who maybe just got started on Google Gemini and doesn't really know where to go. So I think you have to think about both customer sets.
Joe, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I think I do. I broadly agree with that. I mean, I think it's good that it's a separate agentic account. That's the first really good thing that they've got in there, where it's not tapping into someone's potentially quite large main investment account, and that confirmation of purchase at every step, that human layer, is so crucial at this stage, and probably prevents people who are building it in house. Building something really rash, some agentic AI that can go out there with all the permissions set to the max and just can potentially do something quite disastrous. So in a way, it's good that they're building that environment. It's a safer environment, but it's just that question is, does it actually encourage positive trading and investment behavior? I don't necessarily know, because it opens up quite rash decisions to be made. But it's certainly offering the tools in a sensible way. It's just it's a lot for people, amateur investors, to be dealing with, I think.
Oliwia, what's your take?
I think I agree as well. The positives I see is maybe taking the kind of emotion out of day trading, which I think can a lot of times feel a lot like gambling. So if this is a tool that can kind of take that impulsiveness and rash decision making out of investing, that's a good thing. I think in terms of responsibility, this is all a legal, and all sorts of ways, gray area. I think it's also important here is the interpretation of intent. So this is an agentic AI that's based on the natural language processing. Intent is really hard to figure out. We see it in everyday interpersonal relationships, and it's easy to tell an agentic AI in very precise trading terms what is it that you want to do. But if you are a novice investor and you maybe don't, you're not that clued in, and you kind of say something that gets misinterpreted, then that's real money at stake. And I feel like the interpretation of intent has not been figured out in AI just across the board. And now I'd be kind of interested to see what is in place in those financial services models to kind of guard against it or how to address it. But yeah, time will tell. It's really, really hard to predict which way this is going to go.
For sure. Okay, so far we've explored how some of the most innovative fintechs in the US are thinking about AI, from identifying the right customer problem to putting the right guardrails in place. But building something is one thing, building something that customers actually want to use is another. After the break, we'll look at what makes an AI experience truly stand out and whether great AI products are really about the technology at all. Welcome back to FinTech Insider Insights. In the first half, we explored how companies are approaching AI product design, from solving real customer problems to deciding where AI should and shouldn't play a role. Now let's look at what separates a useful AI feature from a genuinely great AI experience. We've got another soundbite from Public. We asked them, how is what you're offering different from ChatGPT or other popular models? How has it been personalized?
The biggest challenge is not waiting around for a better model or even implementing AI. It's how do you get people to trust AI with their dollars, with their money, with their hard-earned investment capital. And in order to get there, we had to come up with a pretty novel concept of marrying the idea of inference and intelligence with deterministic execution, architected in a way and built in a user experience that is seamless and makes it just easy for you to go to your AI and say, I need help with this. And then it just goes and does it without hallucinating, without improvising too much on its own, so that you lose trust in the thing.
Oliwia, I think this is a question I hear time and time again, right? About, what do banks and fintechs need to do to stand out from Claude, from ChatGPT? What do you think of how Public have approached it?
I think it's not the model, it's the governance and architecture around it, because every one of these companies is, broadly drawing on the same or very similar kind of models. So what actually differs is the proprietary data that they can feed it, how much governance they build around it, and then how much they have guarded it from doing something dumb or damaging at scale. And it's interesting to hear them talk about kind of eliminating hallucinations, because I don't think that's been done before, right? Like hallucinations is just, it kind of comes part and parcel with using AI. You can't really get rid of them. It's in the nature of kind of generative models. So I'm interested to know, what do they mean by that? But yeah, I think it's not the model, it's governance, it's architecture, it's the data.
Joe, what do you think? Do you think that's where the competitive advantage really is, or do you see other components to this as well?
Yeah, I do think that's a big competitive advantage. The restrictions that you put in place actually improve the user experience and they build trust. And I think Public have done very well in doing that. They were quite early on with their bot that would give you financial information with live data rather than financial advice. They've been very clear about avoiding doing that. And in doing so, have built up a great product that's actually enhanced their overall product. And then, Olivia touched on it, but the amount of data that they can draw on is also huge. So we're thinking about some of the financial super apps or some of the banks. The amount of data in the kind of product suite that you can feed in to that chatbot has a massive impact on how effective it is. If you have a savings product, a mortgage, crypto, and a checking account, then it's no good at giving you advice on just the checking account if it can't see your broader picture. So that's where things like Revolut Air is actually doing very well, because obviously they've got a huge amount of products and it's very good at tapping into all of them and seeing your kind of full picture. For sure. And I think probably the final thing there is the kind of compute layer behind it. That really has a big impact on the whole kind of product story, how quick it is and how accurate it is. And there's a lot kind of that goes unsaid there, but actually that kind of GPU infrastructure can be very important as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, this is a completely different space to like open banking, but again, some of the same challenges and issues sort of crop up, right? About, do you have access to the right data? How is that data structured? So again, I think it'd be really interesting to see how this plays out. Olivia, you've looked at probably countless experiences in this space. Right? Are there any products that have sort of surprised you or maybe challenged your assumptions about what a good AI experience really looks like?
I think Lemonade, which Joe mentioned before. So they have two chatbots, Maya and Jim, I believe. And one is used to give you insurance quotes, and the other one is to arbitrate on small claims, like almost in real time. And I was expecting with the insurance quote, I was expecting kind of an AI chatbot tacked onto a form. And it's really not that. So that the entire experience feeds in real time into kind of risk and pricing models, and you get an instant answer. So it's not something that has been kind of quickly redesigned for you to feel like you're chatting rather than filling out a form, but actually the chatting is doing the work, and then you get a quote in something like 90 seconds. So yeah, that I see like real use for that, because that is both better as a UX experience for the customer, right? Because they're not dealing with like endless scrolling and forms and so on. And also solves a real problem, works well, is designed really well. So that's that's like a really good experience that clearly started with, okay, what is the problem that we're trying to address? Let's solve it, and then solved it.
No, I think that's a great example. We also asked Public what were the biggest challenges that they faced bringing this experience to life. So let's hear what they had to say.
There's a lot of harness that is designed to work within our domain and with our data specifically. And so if you're trying to get an Apple quote, for example, that's no problem with a generic model, but it's also kind of a meaningless use case because you can just see that on your screen. Once you get into more complicated domains like options, how to read an options chain, what it means in the context of your account, if you want to make various options trades, that's where the harness becomes incredibly powerful and makes a big difference to the user experience.
Joe, I'm guessing lots of people listening to this podcast will have seen tons of AI demos, and demos are probably fairly easy to pull together, but building an actual production-ready AI experience is much harder, right?
Absolutely, I can definitely attest to that. We actually built out a AI tagging system where all of our screenshots, we've got about 500,000 of them, are now tagged. And we thought this would be a relatively simple out-the-box solution for Pulse, but actually it involved lots of prompt engineering and switching between different models and then redoing the prompt engineering and then refining that process, where what we thought would be quite a simple and straightforward integration actually was much more complicated and took a lot longer. But yeah, as a general rule, the demos and the ideas are a lot easier than actually executing it and delivering it to production.
Oliwia, are there any parts of the experience that maybe you think are probably more complex to execute than people realize?
Actually, I would imagine the entire thing, right? Because with financial institutions, you're dealing with, depending on what type of institution it is, but so much siloed data in that's not easily accessible across departments, and so on. You have quite a lot of legal complexity to go through. It's tightly regulated space. Like Joe mentioned, like you cannot, for example, offering financial advice is a very particular service that you cannot just kind of offer willy-nilly. Hallucinations, like this is real money that you cannot play with people's real money. So the entire thing is fairly complex. I would imagine, from the technical side, institutional, and everything, like all of the minefield that comes with designing AI, particularly in financial services.
I think as well, there's a kind of unsaid thing as well that happens as well, which is the kind of cultural impact that it can have within an organization where you don't necessarily know what the implications could be to jobs, and you might successfully launch something, but what does that actually mean for the growth of the team or the size of the team? So I think this is something that can also cause some disruption internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have one last soundbite from Robinhood. We asked them, how are they measuring these experiences to ensure that they're actually better for customers, more impactful than they were pre-AI?
Best way is to ask the customers, to be honest. They'll tell you. They are not shy. You often see on social media, and we just had a large event last week in Greenwich with customers, and they've been on our journey and told us what they want and what they don't like. I think what we wanted to help customers do is know why a stock is moving. There's so much happening with a particular stock in a day that retail may not have access to. An analyst at an investment bank could put out a research report that might move the price based on a price target. You may have sales come out in a particular region, like we've seen it with memory and Apple and price changes and things like that. But what's very difficult sometimes is to put all those data points together and understand, what does that mean for me? If I hold the stock, or I was thinking about buying the stock, or just my portfolio in general, what are some of the other stocks in terms of themes that it might be impacted by? So what we found from customers is it's really helped them think about their portfolio and feel prepared and feel confident to invest. And I think that's a big gap in the UK in particular, is confidence to get started, education to go learn more. And then there's this huge gap into advice where for a long time that's almost been unattainable in the UK. And here is a tool which can help customers. And I think what you'll see is our Cortex tool build out more and more to support customers on their investing journey.
Joe, obviously, we're big advocates of the importance of measuring product experiences, like understanding kind of whether you're delivering the value for customers that you intended to. How do you think product teams should be measuring success when it comes to AI experiences?
Well, I think asking for the feedback is a great place to start, and actually getting focus groups and speaking to individuals and doing that en masse, and also just observing the analytics. For something like Cortex or Trading 212's portfolio analysis, people won't keep on returning to that if they don't like it. It's not like you're being forced down a chatbot route. That's just integrated into the product. So yeah, if people carry on returning to them, then you can tell it is having some kind of impact. It's a bit harder when you've taken away all of the support, for example, and that's the only means to go through, because lots of interactions might actually be a very frustrated user going through it over and over again. So you've got to be quite careful with how you observe those analytics, but those two things are a good place to start. And then obviously there's also the money it might save you internally as well. It's also important and why people actually introduce this.
Olivia, what do you think? What does success really look like here?
I agree. I'd say the one metric that I distrust is engagement. Because you don't really, engagement doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you whether the customer left that interaction happier with their query resolved, with, getting what they needed, or, maybe 70% of interactions, support interactions go through AI because you've eliminated all the other ways of reaching support. So things like behavior change metrics. So, for example, one thing that stood out to me was SoFi's Coach. So they reported that nearly something like 70% of engaged users took a meaningful action after interacting with the coach. So they either paid down some chunk of high interest debt, or they opened a high yield savings account, and so on. So that is a really good metric, because it doesn't, you can interact just to see what this chatbot or this new feature is all about, but whether it led to actual resolution of a query or some change in behavior that was beneficial for the user.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to call out. Okay, we're coming towards, as it's the end of our time. I suppose we've covered loads of really, really interesting examples in today's conversation. I suppose if each of you had to pick one experience that every product team should look at, not necessarily because it's perfect, but because it's moving in the right direction, it's pushing the industry forward, which experience would you recommend and why, Joe?
I would say, aside from some of the ones that we've mentioned today, I would also say take a look at Nubank's voice-activated transfers and actions from there. There's lots of limitations and guardrails in there to make sure that it's all responsibly done, but that's a very important step where people can actually just speak to the chatbot and sign off sending money and things like that. But also is potentially very good for accessibility. So that's a very interesting one to take a look at.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout, actually. And something that, again, I'm sure is a focus of people thinking about AI, but maybe we don't talk about the accessibility gains as much as we should. Olivia, which experience would you point people in the direction of as something to go take a look at?
I think I would go with Public, actually, and the agentic brokerage, because it's engaging with a lot of the hard questions that a lot of the industry hasn't tackled yet, which is the question of intent, right? How do you interpret intent on the user's part? How do you confirm the AI understood this intent before it's live? How do you make the logic and the action transparent and visible to the user? And then how do you implement different guardrails, kill switches and stops? Because that's the action is not reversible. So it's really, really high stakes. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out and whether it's picked up by more retail brokerages and what's the impact of it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think two great examples. And obviously we've focused today's discussion primarily on US-based platforms, banks, fintechs. Joe, what lessons do you think UK and European financial institutions should take from what we've seen so far in the US?
I think when it comes to putting in those limitations, putting in those restrictions, but also not being afraid to kind of go into new ground, so long as it's done cautiously.
Yeah, Olivia, what about you?
I think same. On this kind of spectrum of experiences that I mentioned before. So, kind of inform, advise, and act. Build up the kind of boring, non-flashy architectural guardrails, models. And then, the temptation is, I think, to jump to the most kind of impressive agentic thing or flashy conversational chatbots. But start with the customer problem, build the architecture, and earn your users' trust.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much to today's guests. Where can people find a bit more about you and about Pulse, Joe?
You can find me on LinkedIn. And to find out more about Pulse, go to 11fs.com/Pulse. And just to say, we're also going to be launching a full USA benchmark, and it's going to feature some of the brands we talked about today. And we're very excited. And that's why the focus has been on the US today, because we've kind of been all out on the content over there. And yeah, there's going to be lots more to hear about from there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, really excited to see that. And Oliwia, what about you?
Yeah, same, LinkedIn. And if you'd like to read any of my writing on agentic AI or all sorts of UX topics, please check out Pulse newsletter.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make the show better and helps others to find the show as well. As always, if you want to join the conversation, you can find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or FinTech Insider or email podcasts@11fs.com. Thanks very much. Goodbye.